This is probably what you think of when someone says arcade cabinet. It's simple, iconic, and in many cases designed to house multiple games as titles wane in popularity. Now, I'm not talking about the games themselves, that's a whole other video. Instead, today I want to talk about the cabinet architecture itself. You'll quickly see how this Pac-Man cabinet, no matter how classic it is, can be downright boring in design. So join me on this episode of Push Start, where we dive into the wide and sometimes very weird world of arcade cabinet design. I figured it would be best to divide everything up into 4 categories: cockpit, inventive controls, creative design, and just plain weird. Let's begin with cockpit to jet things off. Some of these you have likely seen before, as many cockpit-style cabinets were meant to be a centerpiece in an arcade. For me, the defining cabinet for this style is Afterburner by Sega. The game received home ports, and it did have a stand-up version of the cabinet. Also out there is a sort of hybrid between the two, as it isn't fully enclosed like the traditional cockpit design. The Afterburner cabinet really gave you an experience few other games would at the time. It rotated, both with your feet on its pedals, as well as the whole machine moving up and down to really give you that feeling of flight. If you ever walk into an arcade that has one, first of all, you won't be able to take your eyes off of it, but second, it is an absolute must-play. If Afterburner is number 1, then let's look at what can be considered 1B with Star Wars Arcade by Atari. Star Wars is a stationary cockpit design with vector graphics, but it still gives you that feeling of flying a classic Star Wars ship. The look is beyond legendary at this point, and was always a cabinet that drew your eyes away from others. These days, it still lives on as Arcade 1-Up, a manufacturer of 3/4 scale arcade cabinets with modern hardware, made a Star Wars cabinet in 2019. A seated variant was available without the full cockpit experience, but fans have since modded it to make one of their own. Moving on to one of my all-time favorite classic arcade games, Sinistar. I was shocked to see that there's a cockpit variant out there. I have never seen this before, even when searching info on the game in years past. I've played home ports in the stand-up cabinet dozens of times, but I couldn't believe that this crazy cockpit variation exists. It's got the angular design stylings like the Star Wars arcade, and it is an interesting choice as you do fly a ship in the game. However, it is not from a first-person perspective. The controls are still just the simple joysticks and buttons instead of having a flight-style control mechanism, which, to be honest, likely would not have played well at all. If I ever see this cabinet in person, I will be first in line to play it. Getting back to cockpit-style cabinets that are designed to make you feel like you're part of the game is Star Trek. It's a simple, more open-style cockpit, but the very true to the original series design makes it feel like it seriously could have been a prop from the show. The controls are on the armrests of the command chair, giving it a very unique feel as opposed to most other cockpit-style cabinets. Thunderblade has a very interesting approach to the cockpit design as it's completely open instead of your typically mostly enclosed design. It almost looks more like a flight simulator than it does a video game. You have a pretty good range of rotation in the seat, and the controls mimic an actual helicopter's. I love that the monitor is mounted down low and at an angle. It gives you a very different perspective compared to a typical cockpit cab that keeps the screen at eye level. Last up in this category is TX1, an Atari racing game that runs a triple monitor setup. The very angular and odd design scheme screams late 70s, early 80s in architecture. The triple screen setup is absolutely awesome. Well, obviously these days you would get some crazy ultra-wide LCD in a game like this, but I love the look of the 3 CRTs. It very much reminds me of that scene in Blank Check with the whole wall of TVs. I think that had to have been every 90s kid's dream. Let's kick off the inventive controls category with something so simple, but so incredible in its execution with Arm Champs. Arm wrestling is a tried and true competition between 2 people, and much like other competitive activities, a video game adaptation was bound to happen. This cabinet sticks out like Waldo if he was the size of a building. It has a life-size arm hanging out ready to grapple with those willing to step up to its challenge. It's unfortunately hard to find a lot of clear images or videos of the first game, which features a more human-like arm, but the sequel, with its cyborg-style arm, has such a cool futuristic look, it's hard to pass up. A few of the games in this category pair up pretty well with each other, so I figured I would look at them together. Alpine Racer and Top Skater are very similar in how they play, as well as the architecture of the cabinets themselves. Both feature sports that lend well to movement, but in slightly different ways. Alpine Racer, being a skiing game, focuses on a lot of the swaying side to side, like one would experience in slalom racing on actual skis. You can certainly get into a rhythm here as you swish side to side, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. Stupid sexy Flanders. Top Skater moves somewhat similar, though far more limited than Alpine Racer, but it does allow you to ollie the skateboard to perform tricks. The board, it doesn't actually leave the machine, but anyone who has skated before can certainly appreciate the pop the board on the Top Skater cab provides. Also making a great pair are Bazooka and Battlezone. Beyond the obvious similarity of a war theme to both of the games, both cabinets allow you a different perspective at the game quite literally. Battlezone has an almost submarine-style periscope device for you to peer into. Bazooka comes with a damn near life-size rocket launcher for you to cozy right on up to. Surprisingly though, outside of the two main gimmicks to the cabinet, the rest of the machine looks fairly standard. Perhaps if the games were manufactured in the 90s, we could have seen some really crazy design choices made to the cabinets. Police 911, also known as Police 24/7, was a cabinet that really caught my attention the first time I saw it in an arcade. It was placed right next to the first change machine you would encounter when you walked in. I knew I had to run right over to play it. Now these days, after things like the Xbox Kinect and the current crop of VR headsets, you might be used to having to use your whole body to interact with a video game. However, at the time, I had never seen anything like it. Sure, Time Crisis had the pedal to press to move in and out of cover, but Police 911 handed you a very realistic looking pistol, and that's it. Moving in and out of cover was totally up to you, the player, and your body. It was a very unique experience, and one you should certainly try if ever given the opportunity. Skydiver is perhaps the most basic of all the cabinets we're looking at today, but the control scheme for its time, and still to this day as simple as it is, was quite inventive. Two rings allow you to manipulate your skydiving character just like the steering lines you would have if you were actually skydiving. I love how the game designers didn't try to just shoehorn in a joystick, or even worse, plain buttons, and went all out with something wildly different. It's that kind of creativity that really sets a game apart. The final two games in this category may be the most well-known, as they either spawned whole other games to copy and perfect their formula, or had a wide range of home console releases. Let's start with Taiko No Tetsujin. The cabinet is beyond colorful and attention-grabbing, but the stars are the two large taiko drums ready to be hit with provided sticks. It's a wonderfully fun rhythm game that anyone can jump into and understand. Drumming is a skill that takes years to hone, but everyone does understand the concept. You take the stick and hit the drum to the beat. It's such an accessible game that has become iconic due to the fact that it went all in with the cabinet, allowing people to physically play the instrument. Last is Guitar Freaks. One could certainly look at this and think it's a bootleg Guitar Hero, but without Guitar Freaks, Guitar Hero and its brother from another mother rock band may not exist. It's one thing to play a rhythm game like Parappa the Rapper and use the existing controller buttons on your PlayStation to tap to the rhythm. It's something totally different to strap on a toy guitar and melt faces in an arcade as you shred the plastic right off the frame. The design is loud and in your face, much like a rock concert would be. The game has truly gone down in history as a genre-creating game. As fun as it is to play a game like this in your bedroom and act out your rockstar fantasies, it's something totally different to essentially perform a concert in the middle of a crowded arcade. Let's shove it over to the creative design category and take a look at the 720 cabinet. Alright, so there's nothing really crazy about the 720 cabinet itself, and to be fair, the lack of side graphics is incredibly disappointing, given the absolutely awesome art that is gray skateboard decks, but dude, it has a sweet boombox up top. Also, you have to give it some bonus points for the classic checkerboard design on the control panel. Time Traveler is a cabinet you have to see to believe. It really is a testament to how developers in the early 90s were pushing things as far as they possibly could. The game was marketed as a holographic experience and wasn't housed in a traditional cabinet. Instead, it was put in what Sega called a micro-theater. The way the characters floated above the surface was achieved by a large curved monitor interacting with a 20-inch CRT monitor hidden inside the enclosure. You would think that this cabinet couldn't be converted into another game, or used for something else entirely. But actually, another holographic game using the Micro Theater was developed, and it was named Holosseum. Holosseum was a poorly received fighting game, but to be honest, anything played on this format is worth checking out, even if it's just for pure curiosity. Tron is a cabinet that when you come across it today still stands out as something that could be a modern machine or a cabinet that an owner modded. Its signature glowing neon blue joystick looks every bit contemporary now as it did futuristic back when the game was released in 1982. It makes perfect sense that a movie like Tron that pushed special effects and film would have an arcade game that worked as a beacon for eyes to gravitate towards. Tank 8 took the concept of the Warlord-style cocktail cabinet that came before it, where 4 players huddle around it to control it, and made it into this massive and insane-looking cabinet. I mean, this thing wouldn't look out of place inside a movie as a military simulation device. It's especially impressive as it's designed to be played by 8 people simultaneously. Just think about how massive the 6-player X-Men arcade cabinet is. Sadly though, I wasn't able to find footage of people actually playing on this cabinet, but I have to imagine it certainly drew crowds when people saw it in an arcade. Speaking of massive arcade cabinets, let's take a look at a couple of them. In no way was subtlety a thought in the design of TMAC. It's seriously the size of a small apartment. It's designed for a family of 4. If you own one of these, you have to choose between it or furniture. The fact that you could link 2 of these mammoths together show exactly why everything started getting really big in the 90s. There's gotta be some type of link between cabinets of this girth and Jinko jeans being fashionable. I wanted to shout out another absolutely massive cabinet, and it's actually from a franchise that's near and dear to my heart. I had never seen this before, and it's for Darius. It's a side-scrolling shooter. The cabinet actually uses 2 monitors that get mirrored up to form an almost singular ultra-wide image. Especially for a side-scrolling 2D shooter, this gives an amazing effect. Definitely one to keep an eye out for. Lucky and Wild is a game I have strong nostalgic attachment to. My dad didn't play many video games with me at home, but he would on occasion indulge at the arcade, and I have some great memories playing games like Cruisin' USA and California Speed with him. We also played a lot of Lucky and Wild, which from a distance looks like your typical sit-down racing game. However, the control setup plants it firmly in this category. Featuring a wheel and 2 mounted guns, player 1 drives and shoots with the gun closest to the wheel, while the second player helps you take out bad guys with their own gun. It's unlike anything else. The feeling of steering with one hand and shooting with the other is a ton of fun. There is a stand-up variant of the cab, but it doesn't come even close to the excitement of the sit-down. Something I truly love about an arcade is the ability to have an experience that you just can't get at home, specifically with shooting games. Laser Ghost goes a step beyond that and combines a traditional arcade shooter with a neat little gimmick. The gun is essentially 2 joysticks attached to each other with a screen mounted up on top. You actually look through this screen instead of looking at the monitor affixed to the cabinet. Through the small screen, you can see the game, but when you fire your weapon, you can also see actual red lasers acting as your ammunition. It's such a neat twist on a tried and true genre. Title Fight was always a very impressive game to me as a child, both for the look of it as well as the gameplay. It's also one of the games I played most growing up. Not only did 2 local arcades to us have Title Fight machines, but so did a restaurant that my family frequented, as well as a local movie theater. I love the tactile feel of the 2 large joysticks you could wrap your whole hands around to punch away. The cabinet features that angular 2-player setup I've always loved. Another cabinet that does that really well is WWF Royal Rumble. Title Fight is just so bright and visually loud you can't help but stare. Couple that with a non-traditional control setup, and I think it's easy to see why so many entertainment establishments scooped up cabinets. I don't have much to say about Maneater besides it's a friggin' arcade cabinet that looks like it's a shark, and here's a picture of Jaws director Steven Spielberg with an intense hairdo much like a football helmet and his shirt seemingly unbuttoned all the way down to the last button. As a kid, you're seemingly always drawn to things you can sit on and move around on. Remember the animal things attached to leg-size springs at the playground? What about the small rides outside of supermarkets your mom would pop a quarter in so you could vibrate on top of a zebra? It's no wonder why arcade manufacturers made so many awesome games featuring mountable objects. The main one that jumps to mind is Hang On, featuring a very Akira-inspired motorbike design. The bike tilts side to side to give you that feeling of competition bikes where riders almost touch the asphalt on turns with their knees. Another nice touch of the cabinet is that it's without an external monitor. Instead, it uses a smaller built-in monitor to keep you close to the action. I figured I'd save the weirdest ones for last, and boy, do we have some oddballs in this group. Starting things off is a game that I'm pretty sure put me on a list for Googling it so much during the research of this video. BoonGabunga is a game that has human-sized legs and a butt protruding from the cabinet. You can interact with the butt in various ways to punish the characters in the game. I don't want to dive too far into the actual gameplay, but rest assured this one is truly insane. Still very weird, but certainly in a very different direction from BoonGabunga is Dension to Go. This is a train simulator game, which in itself is not weird at all. Vehicle simulator games are hugely popular, with titles ranging from driving 18-wheelers to farm equipment. What is a little weird though, and definitely lends itself to being an only in Japan type thing, is that there exists a cabinet that's based off an actual train cab. It's a pretty big cabinet, but does also have a variant without the enclosure. However, if you have the chance to play the version that's essentially the size of a small car, I'd choose that one for sure. Utterly Tickets is utterly ridiculous. I had to do it. A cow that looks like it's straight out of the prop department from a state fair has udders that need milking. The game does pay out tickets, so it's a little bit more of a redemption game than a traditional arcade video game, but I just had to include it here. It's absolutely one of the strangest pieces of amusement or arcade hardware I've ever seen. I hope that someday I'm in the right place at the right time and get to milk my heart out to get those sweet, sweet homogenized tickets. I was honestly surprised to find that one of the oddest ideas for a video game in general had an arcade counterpart. Typing of the Dead is one of those who on earth thought of this game concepts. I remember when the original version was released for the Dreamcast that utilized an actual keyboard. It's essentially an M-rated Mario Teaches Typing. The cabinet features 2 keyboards, so you and a grammar buddy can hook up and take out those zombies Mavis Beacon style. My only hope is that someone cleaned those keyboards, because think how dirty a regular keyboard in any office gets. Multiply that by 1,000,000. I do apologize in advance for most likely butchering the title of our next game. Cho Cho Gaichi seems to have been developed specifically for rage quitters. How many times have you, or someone you know, thrown a controller after dying for the upteenth time? Now you can take out all of your built-up rage and anger and flip tables at the arcade. The game is designed around a very simple concept, either banging on or flipping a table. The construction of the cabinet is actually pretty ingenious, allowing a hinged table piece to be manipulated per how the game instructs. After seeing footage of people playing it, I can only imagine how durable they had to make this game. Have you ever seen someone in a movie rip a tablecloth away from a table without disrupting any of the plates, glasses, or silverware? If you haven't, go try doing it and come back later. Let me know how it worked. If it didn't work though, maybe you should go pump some quarters into the tablecloth hour. It's such a simple concept, but one that's actually pretty effective. The cabinet is super bright and colorful in design to make up for the very simplistic gameplay. It's certainly an exercise in style over substance, but honestly, that's a very important role in the construction and look of an arcade cabinet. They're designed to lure you in from a distance because you can't really see what the gameplay looks like if somebody's standing there playing the game. Monster Hunter Poogy Race is an arcade game in which you shake a pig. I'll let that one soak in for a moment. The cabinet features 2 pig butts that stick out for your eager hands to receive and jiggle. It's a bizarre game for sure, and I'll even give it some bonus points since it's tied to Monster Hunter, certainly not the first thing that would have come to mind for me when I think of a Monster Hunter arcade cabinet. The cabinet does get the job done on all fronts. It's inventive, bright, colorful, and certainly stands out in a crowd. Now, if only we can combine this somehow with Utterly Tickets, we could bring American arcades back from the dead. And that's going to wrap things up for today. I had an absolute blast researching this video, as it led me to find both games I had never seen before, as well as cabinet variants of games that I've played dozens of times. I'm sure there are plenty more out there that fall into the 4 categories we covered today, and hopefully plenty more still to come. I want to thank you for watching this installment of Push Start.